The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers sparkled under 3 artificial suns. Inside, 12 beings from different corners of the galaxy sat around a floating table, their attention fixed on a holographic display showing a small blue planet. Next on our agenda, High Counselor Reed's voice echoed through the chamber, is the assessment of species designation 4261, locally known as humans from the planet Earth. The elderly alien adjusted his shimmering robe, his gray skin reflecting the light from above. The council members began reviewing the data streaming before them. At first, everything seemed routine, just another emerging spacefaring species requiring evaluation. But as they dug deeper into the files, confusion spread across their varied faces. "This cannot be correct," Council Member Brooks said, his antenna twitching in distress. "According to these readings, they achieved spaceflight while still burning fossil fuels. That's not possible." "And yet they did," Reed replied, bringing up more images. "Not only that, but they reached their moon using computers less powerful than our basic maintenance drones." The council chamber filled with murmurs. A blue-skinned member named Turner stood up, her crystalline eyes narrowing. "Their development pattern makes no sense. They invented social media before achieving reliable renewable energy. They created artificial intelligence while still arguing about basic social rights. There's no logical progression." More data streamed across the holographic display. Humans surviving in space using equipment held together with something called duct tape. Space probes continuing to function decades past their expected lifespan. And spacecraft being saved through last-minute solutions that should never have worked. "Look at this," Brooks pointed to a particular file. "They literally threw a car into space for fun. What species does that?" Reed zoomed in on more recent events. Their first warp flight was achieved using parts from something called a microwave oven, and theories written on napkins. He paused, checking if he had read that correctly. Their scientist claimed he got the idea while watching his coffee swirl in a cup. The council members sat in stunned silence. According to every logical progression model they had developed over 10,000 years of galactic civilization, humans should have destroyed themselves at least 3 times by now. Instead, they were out there, exploring space, breaking rules they didn't even know existed. "Perhaps," suggested Turner, "we should send an observer. We need to understand how they function. Their methods defy all known parameters of civilizational development." Reed nodded slowly. "Agreed. But who would we send? This species appears to operate on a completely different logical framework than anything we've encountered before." After much discussion, they selected Council Representative Smith, known for his analytical mind and patience. His mission would be to observe and report on how humans manage to achieve the impossible with such regularity. As the council session drew to a close, Reed made one final note in the official record. "Humanity appears to operate on principles that contradict established universal constants of technological and social development. Their successes cannot be replicated using standard models, and their methods often appear to be random chance combined with what they call gut feelings." He paused before adding, "Most concerning of all, they appear to be completely unaware that what they're doing should be impossible. Further investigation is required to determine if they represent a threat to the established laws of physics." The council members filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about this puzzling species. None of them realized that this was just the beginning of their confusion when it came to understanding humanity. In the empty chamber, the hologram of Earth continued to spin, a small blue marble that somehow managed to produce a species that treated the impossible as merely a temporary inconvenience. Representative Smith would depart for Earth the next day, unaware that his logical worldview was about to be turned completely upside down. Representative Smith stood in the middle of Times Square, his holographic disguise making him appear human while his brain tried to process the chaos around him. Everything about this place defied logical analysis. Humans rushed past him in all directions, many staring at small devices while somehow avoiding collisions. The square blazed with enormous screens showing advertisements, news, and entertainment, all competing for attention. According to his research, this should have reduced human productivity and focus. Instead, they seemed to thrive in the chaos. First observation, he recorded in his neural log. Humans appear to function better with multiple simultaneous distractions. This contradicts all known cognitive studies. He watched a street performer juggle flaming torches while balancing on a rolling board. Nearby, a food vendor prepared multiple orders while carrying on 3 different conversations. None of this made sense. Following his mission parameters, Smith entered a nearby research facility. The council wanted him to understand how humans approached problem solving. As he walked through the laboratory, he noticed something odd. There was no unified system. Each researcher had their own unique workspace, some cluttered, others pristine. "Professor Baker," he said, approaching a researcher who was drawing complex equations on a window with a marker. "I'm here to observe your current project." The professor barely looked up. "Oh, the government observer. Great timing. We just had a breakthrough on the quantum stabilization problem." She pointed to her window drawings. "See, everyone said we needed supercomputers to calculate the field variations, but this morning I was watching my dog chase its tail, and it hit me." Smith blinked. "Your solution to a quantum physics problem came from watching a pet." "Exactly." Baker grinned, adding more equations to the window. "The circular motion created a pattern that reminded me of particle behavior. Sometimes you need to step back from the numbers and just look at things differently." This made no sense to Smith. Council scientists spent years in meditation pods, focusing solely on their problems. How could distraction lead to solutions? Later that day, he witnessed something even more baffling. A critical piece of equipment failed during an experiment. Instead of following standard repair protocols, the humans gathered around it, suggesting increasingly bizarre solutions. "What if we reverse the polarity?" one suggested. "Maybe we could reroute power through the coffee maker," another added. To Smith's horror, they tried both, along with several other impossible ideas. Even more horrifying, one of them worked. The machine hummed back to life after they connected it to a modified coffee maker. "This defies all known engineering principles," Smith recorded. "They succeeded by trying things that should not work." As weeks passed, Smith observed more instances of what he termed illogical innovation. Humans solved problems through dreams, random conversations, and what they called happy accidents. They celebrated failures as learning experiences and treated established impossibilities as personal challenges. In one memorable instance, he watched a team solve a complex AI programming issue while having a heated debate about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. The solution emerged not from focused contemplation, but from a joke someone made about binary code and bread. Preparing his report for the council, Smith struggled to explain what he'd seen. How could he describe a species that treated the laws of physics more like guidelines, who solved problems by not focusing on them, who seemed to succeed not despite their chaotic methods, but because of them? He finally wrote, "Humans appear to navigate reality through a combination of intuition, stubbornness, and what they call thinking outside the box. Though no one could explain to me what box they were referring to. Their methods cannot be quantified or replicated through logical means. They regularly achieve the impossible simply because no one told them it was impossible, or because someone did tell them, and they decided to try anyway." As he prepared to leave Earth, Smith found himself doing something very uncouncil-like. He smiled. Perhaps there was something to be said for being a little illogical after all. His final recorded observation was simple. "They make the impossible possible by simply refusing to believe in impossible." The emergency alert echoed through the Galactic Council chambers, turning the usually white lights to a deep red. Council members rushed to their seats as holographic displays showed a massive stellar anomaly forming in Sector 7. High Councilor Reed's face was grim as he studied the data. "The situation is critical. A Class 5 stellar anomaly has formed near the Centauri colonies. Our scientists predict total system failure within 3 days. The chamber erupted in panic. Class 5 anomalies were rare and devastating, a twist in spacetime that could swallow entire star systems. The Centauri sector housed over 2 billion citizens from various species. Our fastest evacuation ships can reach the sector in 5 days, Council Member Turner reported, her blue skin pale with worry. The numbers are clear. We cannot save them all. Representative Smith, recently returned from Earth, stood quietly in the corner. He watched the Council's best minds tackle the problem with their usual logical approach. Analyzing data, running simulations, calculating casualties. Every simulation ended the same way: massive loss of life. The physics are simple, Brooks announced, his antennae drooping. The anomaly's expansion rate exceeds our fastest evacuation speeds. We must accept the inevitable and save who we can. That's when the unexpected message arrived. Incoming transmission from Earth, the communication system announced. The human face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Captain Anderson of the Earth Space Fleet. He looked calm, despite the chaos unfolding around him. "We couldn't help but notice you folks have a problem," Anderson said. "We'd like to help." Reed blinked all 3 of his eyes. "Earth is not even part of the affected sector. This crisis is beyond your technology level. Your assistance, while appreciated, would be futile." Anderson smiled. "Maybe. But we have an idea." The captain proceeded to outline a plan that made several council scientists grab their heads in dismay. The humans proposed using their small fleet of warp-capable ships to create a resonance field around the anomaly. According to their theory, the combined field could redirect the anomaly's energy into a safer direction. "This is madness," Brooks exclaimed. "The energy requirements alone make this impossible, and the calculations needed to synchronize multiple warp fields would take months." "We did the math during lunch," Anderson replied. "On a napkin. Pretty sure it'll work." "Pretty sure." Turner's voice rose in disbelief. "You want to risk your fleet on pretty sure?" Anderson shrugged. "Look, we understand this isn't your usual approach, but those are 2 billion people out there. Where we come from, we don't abandon folks just because the numbers say we should." The council chamber fell silent. The logical choice was clear: accept the humans' help and doom them along with everyone else, or reject their help and face the inevitable catastrophe. "Your entire fleet would be lost," Reed said quietly. "Even if by some miracle your plan worked, the energy backlash would destroy your ships. Why would you sacrifice yourselves for a sector that isn't even yours?" "Because we can try," Anderson answered simply. "Sometimes that's enough reason." The council members looked at each other. Their logical minds struggled with the concept, risking certain death for an impossible chance at success. Representative Smith stepped forward. "High Counselor, after my time on Earth, I can say one thing with certainty. When humans say they'll try something impossible, they have an unnerving habit of succeeding." Reed looked at the data again. The numbers hadn't changed. Everything said this would fail. But he had read Smith's reports about humans. Perhaps just this once, logic needed to take a back seat. "Very well," Reed announced. "Captain Anderson, you have the Council's permission to attempt your solution." Anderson nodded. "Thank you. We'll head out right away. By the way, we already started moving when we sent the message. Our ships will reach the anomaly in 6 hours." As the transmission ended, the Council sat in stunned silence. The humans had assumed permission would be granted and acted accordingly. It was completely against protocol, totally illogical, and possibly their only hope. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the anomaly, 12 ships small against the swirling purple-black mass that threatened to swallow entire worlds. From the Council's observation station, the scene looked like insects facing a storm. Captain Anderson stood on his bridge, drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's okayest Captain." His crew worked at their stations, making final adjustments to their warp drives that, according to council scientists, would definitely destroy them all. Engineering reports ready, Captain, his first officer reported. Though Walker says he had to bypass some safety protocols using paper clips and rubber bands. Anderson nodded. Sounds about right. Open channel to all ships. The faces of 11 other captains appeared on his screen. None of them looked particularly worried about attempting something that violated several laws of physics. All right, folks, Anderson said, taking another sip of coffee. We've got 2 billion people counting on us. Our plan is crazy, probably impossible, and definitely going to void our warranty. Just another Tuesday for humanity. Let's do this. On the Council observation station, scientists watched in horror as the human ships began positioning themselves around the anomaly. Their instruments showed readings that made no sense. They're modifying their warp fields. One scientist shouted, "The resonance patterns are all wrong. This will tear their ships apart." Representative Smith watched quietly. During his time on Earth, he'd learned that humans had a peculiar relationship with the word wrong. Sometimes, their wrong way worked better than the right way. The human ships formed a circle around the anomaly. Each vessel's warp drive hummed with energy, creating a web of interconnected fields that shouldn't have been stable. According to every calculation, they should have collapsed instantly. "What are they doing now?" Brooks asked, his antennae twitching wildly. "Those energy patterns, they're randomizing their field frequencies." Anderson's voice came over the comm system. "We noticed the anomaly pulses have a rhythm. Reminds me of an old Earth song. So we're going to match it, then change the tune." The Council scientists stared at each other. They were using music theory to fight a space-time anomaly. It was absurd. It was illogical. It's working, Turner whispered. The anomaly's swirling pattern began to change. The human ships pulsed their warp fields in a complex dance, like conducting a symphony in space. Their combined fields created patterns that rippled through space-time itself. In the Council chamber, alarms blared as instruments registered impossible readings. "The ship's hulls can't take this strain," someone shouted. "Their warp cores are reaching critical levels. Hold together, you beautiful mess," Anderson muttered to his ship. The bridge sparked and shuddered around him. Just a little longer. The anomaly's purple-black mass began to shift, its destructive energy redirected by the humans' improvised solution. But the cost was becoming clear. The human ships were being torn apart by the forces they'd unleash. "Hull breach on Deck 3. The first officer reported. "Warp core temperature beyond measurable limits." Anderson finished his coffee. "Bring us in closer. If we're going to shake the universe, might as well give it a proper dance." The human fleet tightened their formation, their ships groaning under impossible stresses. Computer systems failed. Backup systems sparked, and emergency systems did things their designers never intended. From the observation station, it looked like the anomaly was fighting back. Energy tendrils lashed out at the human ships, threatening to tear them apart. "They need to withdraw," Reed commanded. "Order them to retreat." Smith shook his head. "They won't. I've seen this before. When humans decide something needs to be done, they don't stop until it's finished, or they are." The human ship's warp fields pulsed one final time, sending a shockwave through space that made every instrument in the sector temporarily go dark. When the readings returned, the Council members stared in disbelief. The anomaly was changing course, its destructive energy turning away from the populated systems. The human fleet hung in space, their ships battered but somehow still intact. Anderson's voice crackled through the static. "See, told you it would work, though we might need a few band-aids and some duct tape up here." The aftermath of the human fleet's attempt at the impossible left the Galactic Council's scientific community in chaos. While engineers worked to repair the battered human ships, Council scientists argued loudly in their chambers, waving data pads and pointing at incomprehensible readings. It should not have worked. Chief Scientist Brooks paced the room, his antennae now tied in knots from stress. "The energy patterns make no sense. Their modifications to the warp drives violated at least 15 fundamental laws of physics." Captain Anderson sat in the middle of this storm of scientific outrage, still drinking coffee from his battered mug. A bandage covered a cut on his forehead, and his uniform was singed, but he looked oddly content. "Maybe you're overthinking it," he suggested, earning gasps from several scientists. "Sometimes you've got to stop looking at the numbers and just feel the rhythm of the problem." Feel the rhythm. A council physicist nearly fainted. You can't feel quantum mechanics. Anderson shrugged. Tell that to the anomaly. It seemed pretty happy to dance with us. The debate was interrupted by alarms from the engineering bay where the human ships were docked. Council member Turner rushed in, her blue skin almost white with panic. "The humans," she exclaimed. They're repairing their ships." "That's good, isn't it?" Smith asked, confused by her distress. "No, you don't understand. They're fixing quantum-grade technology with spare parts and something called WD-40. They're replacing damaged warp coils with modified microwave parts. One of them is using a gaming console to replace a burnt-out navigation computer." The council chamber descended into chaos again. Teams of scientists rushed to the engineering bay to witness this heresy against proper technological procedures. They found the human engineers cheerfully violating every repair protocol in the council's database. One crew had turned their ship's damaged food replicator into a backup power source. Another had replaced a broken quantum sensor with something they called an Magic Ball. "Stop," Brooks shouted. "These repairs aren't authorized. They haven't been tested. They haven't been peer-reviewed." Walker, Anderson's chief engineer, looked up from where he was soldering a warp core component with a modified hairdryer. "Tested? Sure they are. If they don't explode immediately, that's a pass." The council scientists watched in horror as the humans continued their repairs. Their methods were crude, their solutions impossible, and somehow, everything worked. "This defies all logic," Turner whispered, watching the human engineer fix a quantum computer with duct tape and paper clips. "That's humanity's secret weapon," Smith replied, finally understanding what he'd observed on Earth. They don't just defy logic. They ignore it completely when it gets in their way. Anderson gathered his captains for a meeting while the repairs continued. Their ships, patched together with impossible solutions and improvised fixes, were somehow registering better performance readings than before the crisis. "How?" Reed asked, staring at the readings. "How do you do these things?" Anderson thought for a moment. "You know how kids can do amazing things because nobody told them it's impossible. Humanity just never grew out of that phase. We see a problem. We fix it. If the universe says no, we negotiate." The council's scientific community would spend years studying the human fleet's repairs and modifications. They would write thousands of papers trying to explain how the impossible solutions worked. None of their theories would fully explain it. Meanwhile, the human ships prepared to depart, their systems humming with energy in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Their warp drives now ran on modified principles that the council couldn't understand but couldn't argue with either. "Just one question," Turner asked Anderson before they left. "What if your solutions hadn't worked?" Anderson grinned. "Then we would have tried something else. When failure isn't an option, you keep trying until the impossible becomes possible." As the human fleet departed, their ships held together by determination, duct tape, and solutions that laughed in the face of physics, the council realized something important. Perhaps the laws of the universe were more like guidelines when humans were involved. In the Grand Archive chamber of the Galactic Council, dozens of scientists huddled around holographic displays, reviewing data from the anomaly incident for the 100th time. 3 months had passed, and they still couldn't explain exactly how the humans had succeeded. "Look at this reading." Brooks pointed to a complex wave pattern. According to their captain, they matched the anomaly's rhythm to an Earth song called "Another One Bites the Dust." How is that even relevant to space-time physics? Turner, who had spent weeks studying human music theory trying to understand the connection, shook her head. "That's not even the strangest part. Their engineer says he got the idea for the warp field modifications while watching his cat chase a laser pointer. High Counselor Reed sat at the head of the chamber, listening to report after report. Each one tried to explain the human success through logical means. Each one failed. Perhaps, Representative Smith suggested, we're approaching this wrong. We're trying to find logic where there isn't any. The chamber fell silent. Such a statement would have been considered heretical just months ago. But after what they'd witnessed, explain, Reed commanded. Smith activated a hologram, showing the human fleet's battle with the anomaly. Look at their approach. They didn't try to understand the anomaly fully. They didn't spend years studying it. They saw a problem, had a feeling about a solution, and just tried it. But how can we learn from that? Brooks asked, frustrated. How do we replicate feelings and hunches? We don't, Smith replied. That's the point. The humans succeeded because they didn't try to follow established patterns. They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it anyway. The evidence was undeniable. The Council scientists had analyzed every aspect of the human solution. Their warp field modifications shouldn't have worked, but they did. Their jury rig repairs shouldn't have held together, but they did. Their entire approach violated fundamental laws of physics, but it saved 2 billion lives. Captain Anderson's final report to the Council was just 2 sentences. Sometimes the universe tells you something's impossible because it hasn't met someone stubborn enough to prove it wrong. Humans are pretty stubborn. In the following weeks, more reports came in from across the galaxy. The human solution had done more than save lives. It had opened up new possibilities in warp field theory. Their impossible modifications were leading to advancements in quantum mechanics. Even their emergency repairs were inspiring new approaches to engineering. They did all this, Turner marveled, because they didn't know they couldn't. The Council chamber hosted one final debate on the matter. Some members argued that the human success was a dangerous fluke. Others insisted their methods, while unorthodox, had proven themselves effective. Reed called for silence. We face a simple truth. Humanity achieved in 3 hours what our best mind said was impossible. They did it with outdated technology, improvised solutions, and what they call gut feelings. We must accept that perhaps our understanding of the universe is not as complete as we thought. Brooks raised a trembling hand. But their methods, they make no sense. Exactly, Smith smiled. That's their strength. They don't try to make sense of the impossible. They just do it anyway. The final report on the anomaly incident was sealed in the Council archives. Its conclusion was surprisingly short. Human success cannot be explained through standard logical analysis. Their methods appear to operate on principles we do not yet understand, combining intuition, determination, and what they call winging it. Most concerning is their ability to achieve the impossible simply because they refuse to accept its impossibility. As the Council adjourned, Reed made one final observation. Perhaps, he said, the universe isn't as rigid as we thought. Perhaps sometimes it needs a species crazy enough to ignore the rules and try the impossible. Turner nodded. And perhaps that's why humans succeeded where we would have failed. They didn't see an impossible problem. They just saw a problem that needed solving. In the years that followed, the Council would often call upon humanity when faced with impossible situations. Sometimes, the best solution to a logical problem was an illogical species who didn't believe in impossible. 1 year after the anomaly incident, the Galactic Council gathered for a historic session. Representatives from all member species filled the Crystal Dome chamber, their excited whispers echoing off the walls. Today, they would officially classify humanity in the Galactic database. High Counselor Reed stood at the central podium, surrounded by floating displays showing Earth and its achievements. The traditional classification process, used for over 10,000 years, had failed to categorize humans properly. We have spent a year studying humanity, Reed began. In that time, they have continued to confound every attempt at logical classification. The displays showed recent human achievements, They had improved their warp drives using principles based on coffee swirls. They'd developed new medical treatments inspired by watching soap operas. One human had even solved a century-old math problem while sleeping. Last week, Turner reported, a human ship escaped a black hole's gravity, well by playing something called pinball with nearby asteroids. When asked to explain their calculations, the captain said they just had a good feeling about it. Brooks, his antennae now permanently twisted from stress, presented his findings. Their success rate with impossible tasks is actually increasing. They're becoming more illogical, not less. They're learning to trust their gut feelings more than our established sciences. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members argued that humanity was too unpredictable to be trusted. Others pointed out that their impossible solutions had advanced galactic science by centuries. Representative Smith stepped forward. In my time studying humans, I've realized something important. What we see as illogical, they see as creative. What we call impossible, they call challenging. Their greatest strength isn't their technology or their intelligence. It's their refusal to accept limitations. Reed nodded, which brings us to today's purpose. We must create a new classification, as humans do not fit any existing category. The displays showed the proposed classification, species classification, immune to logic, a designation for species who achieve advancement through methods that defy logical analysis. The chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years, no species had ever received a unique classification. This designation, Reed continued, acknowledges humanity's unique approach to problem solving. Their solutions, while impossible to replicate through logical means, have proven consistently successful. Turner added, they have also shown a remarkable ability to teach other species to think differently. Several of our younger scientists have started asking, what would humans do when faced with impossible problems? The council voted. The classification passed unanimously, though several members noted that it felt strangely logical to classify humans as immune to logic. When Captain Anderson received the official notification, he laughed. The council had intended the classification as a scientific designation, perhaps even a warning. Humanity took it as a compliment. Within months, human ships began painting proudly immune to logic on their hulls. Earth's diplomatic center hung the classification plaque in their main hall. Humans celebrated their official recognition as the galaxy's problem solvers who didn't play by the rules. You've turned our warning into a badge of honor, Reed told Anderson during a formal ceremony. Anderson grinned. That's another human trait. We're pretty good at turning things around to work in our favor. Besides, being logical all the time sounds boring. The final entry in the Galactic database read, humanity, first and currently only species classified as immune to logic. Their methods remain unexplainable, their solutions impossible, and their success rate defies statistical analysis. Recommended approach. When conventional methods fail, ask a human. They will likely suggest something impossible. More importantly, they will probably make it work. As the story spread through the galaxy, more species began seeking human assistance with their impossible problems. The humans never disappointed, solving each challenge with their trademark combination of creativity, stubbornness, and complete disregard for what should be possible. The classification immune to logic became a title of respect throughout the galaxy. After all, in a universe bound by rules and logic, sometimes you needed someone crazy enough to believe the impossible was possible. As Anderson often said, the impossible is just something that hasn't met a stubborn human yet.